Hello, this video is about relative and parallel modes. I'm going to change my camera so you can see my keyboard. So, relative modes are keys that have a relative relationship, like relative major and minor. You may know of C major and A minor being relatives because they share the same key signature. That could be true for any mode. So you call these white key modes or church modes. So this relative approach is probably the easiest way to learn them. In my opinion, not the most effective in the long run, but we'll go over the other approach, the parallel mode approach, as well. So it's also historically accurate because when medieval theorists were trying to relay back to the Greeks what they did with their tetrachords and their relationships, they misunderstood their theory a little bit. And so our modes since then have been different than the Greek modes, but they had their inspiration with the Greeks. So the names are derived from Greek city-states. Like you could think of Doric columns. You might recognize some of these other names, Aeolian harp. So here we go. Let's go through these. So if we start from C to C, so this video is more informational. The next couple of videos will have improvisation entailed. So Ionian or major, Dorian, D to D, E to E, Phrygian, F to F, Lydian, G to G, Mixolydian, A to A, Aeolian, B to B, Locrian, and then we'd be back to major Ionian. So the advantage is you could have a melody in Ionian and then one in Dorian and have the cadence in Dorian and just sort of keep to the same key signature. In Renaissance music, if they had Dorian, they would use that lack of a leading tone to keep it perhaps a little more dreamy. And then when they needed resolution, they would have this major sixth, the leading tone going up and that going down. And that's the same thing we do with harmonic and melodic minor today. We borrow, you could say we're borrowing from major, or that's probably not how they thought about it in the Renaissance. You're creating a leading tone. So at that time, the C sharp would lead to D. If you were an A, Aeolian, or you would even add the F sharp to avoid that augmented second, and you would have a leading tone in A. So that's where the F sharp and G sharp would come from. Also, if you were Mixolydian, you'd have this really dreamy, no half steps to scale degrees 1 and 5, and then boom, you're at your cadence. Strong octaves, stepwise resolution to the outer parts. Okay, so that's where you can see these notes came from, how they would be used, the F sharp, G sharp, and C sharp. The B flat was often used to avoid a tritone. So instead of having here, you would have, well, you wouldn't want that fourth most likely unless you're in the medieval times. But instead of having the tritone, say in a melodic context even, so instead of having, you might have, sorry, but probably you wouldn't, yeah. So anyway, and then the B flat, so the E flat would be used similarly in transposed modes called like hyper-Dorian, hyper-Mixolydian, where everything would be moved up a fourth, and then the E flat would function similarly as to how the B flat functioned, and the B flat would be a fixed part of those modes. So that's how all the black keys would work in the relative mode setting. Here's some songs, Scarborough Fair. You can look up these songs, Phrygian Gates. For Phrygian, Maria from West Side Story, or The Simpsons. And notice here the tonic triad with two incomplete neighbors. So you have this double neighbors, I should say. Double incomplete neighbors going around that G, so with the tonic core, tonic triad core there. So Lydian, Mixolydian, you have clocks. that's Mixolydian focus. Aeolian, same as natural minor. Locrian, it's hard to find a good Locrian song, so I just looked some up because Locrian is so unstable. If you play in Locrian, all we have to do is move one note and we feel like we're in C major again, or Ionian. So often my jazz teacher said you need a drone to keep it stable, or stable enough that it doesn't feel like you need to go somewhere else. So it's even there. I want to go to E Phrygian. The Scarborough Fair, that's one I glossed over. So if we thought of so right there, that B natural would make that Dorian. All right, so let's move on here. I want to point out that you can think of major as whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, or you could say play, whole, whole, half, play, whole, whole, half, with play being on that whole step. It's an easy way to learn major scale with 2 tetrachords, play, whole, whole, half, play, whole, whole, half, used by the Alfred method. I think it's very effective to learn all of the scales quickly, major scales quickly. If you shift it just one, like you did on the piano, going up to D for Dorian, then you have whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole to get to Dorian. Phrygian, half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. Lydian, whole, 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 half, whole, whole, half. And so you can see the relationships there. I hope that's helpful. A lot of theorists will use this sort of 12-pointed circle to create a visual of scales with all their whole and half steps. I didn't see one that used modes like this, so I created that for you. Now we're going to talk more about parallel modes. The advantage of using parallel modes is you can go from bright to dark. And also there's a dramatic, dreamy spectrum in there too. We'll talk about that. So when we play Lydian, that's a very bright mode. With the Phi going to So. And if we do Ionian, we have Fa Mi, right, instead of Phi So. Both of them have Ti Do. They both have that strong half-step pull to the very strong magnet. They have to overcome gravity, as theorists would call it. Way back to Gradus ad Parnassum and probably earlier by Fuchs. A seminal theory textbook that either directly or indirectly affected all of the Western composers from the classical period through the Romantic periods and onward. Even Schoenberg had all the students go through it to study atonal music. He thought it would still help them, even with if they were atonal composers. So here we go to Mixolydian. Now we have flat 7. And with chords, that's sort of interesting. To have a minor 5 chord with a lack of that leading tone. It's more dreamy, no half steps to 1 or 5. And Dorian also has no half steps to scale degrees 1 or 5. It does have Re Me. Now Me is a smaller magnet. The math ratio to create that interval in just intonation is 6/5, whereas 5/4 for a major third. And so the major third is considered more consonant. So in the Renaissance, if they had a third at their final chord, they would resolve to a major third, even if they're in a minor key. That's called a Picardy third. So anyway, now we have our minor third. Right, so that makes it a little bit darker, but with that major 6th, it's not as dark as minor. And the chords you get in this mode are quite lovely. With a major 4th chord. I think it's very dreamy, a little more hopeful than minor. 2 to 3, like I said, is going to a weaker magnet. It has to overcome gravity by going up. And though it does influence modulation in minor modulations tend to go to the relative major, largely because of that 2-3 tendency. So now we have Aeolian, which is natural minor. So you're familiar with that. If you're purely an Aeolian, you'd have a minor 5 chord. But if you were an Aeolian in the Renaissance, they would use Ti-Do at the cadence. And they would even raise La-Ti-Do, like I said earlier, to avoid, if they wanted to avoid this augmented second. So that's where melodic minor comes from. It's really a variant of minor called scalar variants. Like Dorian has its variant with its own leading tone. Phrygian is different because it has an upper leading tone with a half step above. So beautiful mode. To me, it goes from sad to tragic. With that half step downward resolution to the most stable one, and it having more dark pitches. Now we have 2 half steps going down to 1 and 5, which to me makes Phrygian one of the most dramatic modes, just like Lydian has 2 half steps going up. Fi, So, O, and Ti-Do. So we have Ra and Phrygian, it's Ra, Do, Le, So. Phrygian's also used not only in mode mixture, which would happen a lot in the Romantic period and in film score and in jazz, but if you think of some of the chords like the Neapolitan 6 chord, so you would have that sort of Phrygian element in even in the classical time period. If we go to Locrian, we have an unstable fifth. In my perception, you cannot have a stable chord or a stable scale without a perfect fifth above the fundamental. And yeah, try it with the whole tone scale. I mean, there's some tritones in there, but if you just think of those major seconds, it's not so harsh, but without a perfect fifth. And watch what happens when you have one. Right, it's like you're waking up from the dream. Okay, so Locrian is sort of crazy. If we're gonna not want to resolve to D flat, then we need to probably have a drone or avoid going up to D flat from C. Notice the song up here, Dust to Dust by John Kirkpatrick, about digging graves. So it's a very, very almost sad to the point of craziness, like loco. Okay, so that's our walking through all the different modes. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to go through it with more experiential exercises in the next couple of videos. Thank you so much. And I'll change cameras to say goodbye. God bless you. Have a great day.